Yes. Morning. We're learning as this chus before Shlem Filan Chai Baserach. We're towards the bottom of Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis. We're going to start from Amar Ula because the Gemara is going to be talking about this, and we need to remember. Amar Ula Amar Rish Lakish. Ula said b'Shem Rish Lakish. Tami shehichlis yadil fnim like. This is the din that we had seen earlier in the Gemara about bia b'mitzvah shma bia, whether partially entering the Azara is considered a bias mikdash. So he said, a Tamish gets Malkus Shenema B'chol Kodesh Leisiga. We learn out from the pasuk that bia b'mikdash is shma bia, that is someone whose Tameh sticks his hand in, he's going to get Malkus. Malkus, we see, because the pasuk says B'chol Kodesh Leisiga, V'la Mikdash Leisiga. Malkus bia l'negia, ma negia b'mitzvah shma negia, bia b'mitzvah shma bia. Just like touching something is mechayev you. So bia b'mikdash also doesn't have to be a whole guf. It could just be a part of his guf. Ezer of Haichi Elula. The Tzarish Chal Shmini Shalai Liyas B'Erev HaPesach. We're not going to go so much in detail to this case. A Mitzayra that his 8th day came out to be an Erev Pesach. V'ra carried by B'Yom. I mean, additionally, he was raw carried on that day. So he has two reasons why he's Tameh. He's first of all Tameh as a Mitzayra, and he's also Tameh as a carry. B'Tava, and he was Taival from his carry. So he's now becomes a full yoim, that at the end of the day he's going to be entirely tar, but in the meantime he still has the Isser to go into the Azara. Amru Chacham, even though no other Tvul can go in. I just put that garbage there 5 minutes ago. I think you have to turn off the water. It's got to be coming from a pipe. Yeah. Yeah. Unless you have access to the office and you can see if there's a cutoff valve or whatever is causing it. Okay, good luck. Even though generally it's full yoim, someone who was raw carry and they titled and it wasn't yet, the night is not allowed to go into the Azara, then nichnas. This can go in. Why? Even though this is aser, not being taival will result in him being unable to bring his carbon pesach, and that's an essay that is karas if you don't bring a carbon pesach. So that essay, v'yitcha essay she'en b'karas, will be deicha the essay of the carry, and it will allow him to go in and do his go into the. I'm sorry, I keep on getting this wrong. It's not the problem. The problem is not the going into the Beis Hamikdash. The problem is the carry is not even allowed to go onto the Machnali. It's not allowed to even go into the Harabayis. So you can't get close enough to do his Matan B'Hainis for his Mitzayra if he doesn't override the Isser of a carry to go into the Machnali, into the Harabayis. So the Torah said. Rav Haishi. So the Brisa said that you can go, because if he doesn't go override the Isser of a carry to go onto the Harabayis, he won't be able to go to the Shar Nikner, to the gate near the Azara, and do his Matan B'Hainis, and therefore he's going to remain in Mitzayra, and he won't be able to eat the Carbon Pesach that night. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar, but that's Rabbi Yochanan Amar Dvar Torah Afilu Esa Ein. Rabbi Yochanan said this whole thing is not a problem. This Isser of a carry, Balkari, a Tvul Yom of a Balkari going into the Machna Levia is not even an essay. It's not even an essay she'ein b'karos. It's not an essay at all. It's a derabban. Shenema v'yamad yeshav b'kal Yehuda v'Yishalayim beis Hashem l'nei chatzar chadasha. You stand in front of the chatzar chadasha. My chatzar chadasha doesn't mean in front of the new gate. They said new things. You can't stand Machna Levia. The Chacham Geyser that a Tvul Yom can't go into the Machna Levia. So it's not a problem. The Tvul Yom can go into on the Harabayis. It's only the Rabban. So we have two different ways of answering it, right? The first teretz is that that we said that the Tul Yom for a carry can go into the Machna Levia because it's a Eser She'ein Bakaris, and it's better that he should go in, get rid of his tzaras, do the avoida and the carbon for his tzaras on the 8th day of his tzaras. So then that will get rid of his tzaras and he'll be able to participate in the Pesach, which is Eser She'yesh Bakaris, rather than observing the Isser of going into the Machna Levia for Balkari, which is Ein Bakaris. Yechon said in general the Machna Levia for a Tul Yom for a carry is only the Rabban. So then now the Gemara comes to its point. V'yamrid bia b'mikdash shma bia. If you say that going partially into the mikdash, into the azara, is considered hachnasa, heichi ma'al yadav b'bahainis. How is he able to stick his hand in to do the bahainis when he's balkari? According to the first teretz, we said we allow him to go into the Machna Levia because that's only Eser She'ein Bakaris, and then he'll be able to do his tzaras avoida of getting the avodas hadam on his bahainis and on his thumb and on his toe, and then he'll become tar that he could get the carbon pesach, which is sheyesh bakaris. But he says when you do the avodah of the tzaras, you have to put your hand into the azara, which is not a problem as far as tzaras is concerned. That's what Torah told you to do. But he's a balkari, and a balkari. Until now, we were talking about the Machna Levia, just going on the Harabais. But if you hold bia b'mitzvah shma bia, so putting his hand in for that avodah is going to be a da'iraisa sheyesh bakaris. Amalei matayncha. He said, no, you yourself can answer what you just said. Brought as a kasha, that's really the answer. Shani mitzayra hayel v'hotel tzarasa yihoter lekirav. We say a din of hayel, that you're trying to say that putting his hand in as a balkari, Tul Yom balkari, is going to be also as a iser karas. It's not just not an iser karas, it's chutra, because the Torah allows a mitzayra while he's a mechusa kapurim. That this is the routine of this is the procedure for a mitzayra. Yes, the Torah says the mitzayra has to get dam on his matan b'hainis. He has to get it put onto his thumb, and that's from the dam ha'asham, which is the dam of a kosher gadashim, which is certainly not allowed to go outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Torah is telling you to do something, you got to do it. So obviously, this person, even though he's tamei, the only way for him to get the matnas dam is to put his hand in. So the Torah is telling you to do it. So once the Torah says that the Isser Mitzayra is going to be mutter, we also say the Isser Keri gets schlepped along with the din of Hayel. Hayel v'hotel t'larasai, hotel l'kir. Amr Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, so from this result that we've come out, the way Ula has explained that there's no din of bia b'mitzvah shma bia, because we're saying that the hayel v'hotel l'tzarasai hotel l'kirav, kasav Ula Ruben Zavin v'nasu tmei mason. We've come across the din of if Roiv of Klal Yisrael is tamei by the time of the carbon pesach, they're allowed to sit. The Torah says there's an exception, and the carbon can be brought with Roiv of the tzibur being tamei. But that's only Tamei Tumas Mace, not Tamei Tumas Zav. Ula will say if most of Klal Yisrael is Tamei Tumas Zav, but not a Tamei Mace, and then they also become a Tamei Mace. Just like we said in the previous sugya, since we say that once you have a hatter for one tumah, it extends to a different tumah. We'll say the same thing. When they become Tamei Mason, when Roiv of Klal Yisrael becomes Tamei Mason, since the Torah is mater Tamei Mace to bring the carbon pesach, if Roiv of Klal Yisrael is Tamei Tumas Mace, they'll also be mater the Tumah Ziva, which would normally not be overridden by the carbon pesach, but since they could bring for the Tamei Mace, they could also bring in spite of the Tamei Ziva. Amalei Abaye, Midami, how could you compare the two? Tumah Ishtaroi, Ziva lo Ishtaroi. He says the sequence over there is off. Over there was already Isser Ziva before he became Tommy Tumas Mace. By our case, he was first Mitzaira Mechusa Kapara, and then he was Ra Keri. So we say the Keri never had a chance, the Isser of a Keri to go in, never had a chance to apply because he was already Hutra because of the preceding, he turned it off, because of the preceding Heter for Tzaras. But over here, there was first the Isser Ziva, and then he became Hutter because of the Tzibur became Roiv Mason. So you can't have a Isser that was already in place, a Tumah that was already in place, removed by a later Heter. Amalei said, I haven't did balance. Maybe this is what Rav Yosef was saying. Ruben Tumei Mason and Asu Zavim. If most of them were Tumei Mason and they became a Zav, that means the order was the other way around. They were first Tumei Mason and then they became a Zav. And since they already Hutter from the Tumah of Mace, so we say that the Tumah Ziva never applies to him. Amalei in, he says, that is taka what Rav Yosef was saying. The Gemara v'achati loy dami mitzayra teruhu hayel v'ishtri tuma dechuyehu lahayitchi lahalayitchi. He says there's a difference in the nature of the heter of a mitzayra. We say a mitzayra, the Torah says he has to get the dam of the asham on his hands, and like we said, the dam of asham can't leave the Beis Hamikdash. It's also to take it out chutzla to the Beis Hamikdash. So you have an inherent conflict. How are you going to put the dam on the person's thumb? If his thumb, he's tummy as a mitzvah until he gets this procedure done. So he's tummy, and you want to put it on his thumb in order to get him out of being a tummy, but you can't take the asham out, the dam asham out. So you're stuck. What are you supposed to do? So we say the Torah said that's the way you're mitara mitzvah. So it must mean, even though normally someone whose tummy cannot be machnes his thumb, this person can. So that is a hutra. Yeah. But the case that we just said, Rabbi Yosef said, that we said that someone who, if the Roiv of Klal Yisrael was Tamei Tumas Meis, so therefore the din is, and we said, Lagabi Karban Pesach, the Tumah is Hutra B'tzibur. We override it, and they could bring the Karban Pesach B'tumah. Even if they got a Tomei Tumas Ziva, the Tumas Meis, we say Hayel B'Hutra, since it was Hutra for Ziva, for Meis, it also is Hutra for Ziva. But that's not a Hutra that it becomes, it's as if there was no Isser in the first place. By Mitzayra, it's an inherent part of the bring of a mitzvah. So the Torah is telling you, this is the way you're supposed to do it. It's not a dechuya. It's not being pushed aside. But by the din of, certainly it's ideal is if people are not, Roiv of Klal Yisrael is not Tameh. So, but the Torah was matchet. The Torah says it's pushed aside. So there's a difference between chutra and chuya. So how could you compare the two? How could you, Rabbi Yosef say, since we say hayel ve'ishteri legabe mitzayra, so we're also going to say hayel ve'ishteri legabe where Roiv of Klal Yisrael is tamei tumas meis. The two different things. One is chutra. Mitzayra is chutra. It's entirely not aser. The Torah never meant for it to be aser because that's the way Mitzayra is mitar himself. But Masha Enkein, Roiv Klal Yisrael being tamei is not an ideal. The Torah was matchet, pushed it aside, but it's still better not to have it that way. Amalei Rava Adrab. He said, he says exactly the opposite. Ipcha mistabra. I would think about it differently. Mitzayra heteru laha ishtaroi laha la ishtaroi. Since Mitzayra, he says the other way around. Since Mitzayra is a heter, that means the Torah says, b'makom, there's no isser in the first place for a Mitzayra to put his hand in while he's tamei, because that's the only way. The Torah said there is such a thing as a Mitzayra being mitar himself, and the only way for that to happen is for him to put his hand into the azara while he's tamei. So that only applies to a Mitzayra. You can't say from there hayel in that case. Or if you could say, if you say hayel on that, Mitzayra the Hateru lahashtar Toma dechuyi mali chad dechuyi mali shtei dechuyis. As far as dechuyis, then we could. It's easier to understand why once you're being doicha the iser tumas mace, you're also going to be doicha the tumazah. But to say hayel ishtari ziva, you should also be matir the tuma. Excuse me. The tumah of a balkari, a tful of a balkari, that's the heter of mitzayra is very specific to mitzayra. I wouldn't say hayil that since one thing is mutter there, therefore some other unrelated tumah will also be mutter. So Gemara just makes a summation, but what we can definitely see from this, this is a subject which we've come across. It's a controversial subject whether Tuma is Hutra B'tzibur or Dechuya B'tzibur. But from both of the arguments, both of the contentions that they've made, whether you say it the first pshat or the second pshat, both of them are saying a svara that Tuma is Dechuya B'tzibur as opposed to Hutra. Zok Gemara, Lema Misayeh Alei. Let's bring a raya. Now we're going back to our original topic that we had said that bia b'mixas is shma bia. If a person sticks his hand even partially into the azara, that's considered a bia. That is asa. While he's tamei, he's gonna be asa. There are various karbanas that a person has to be samech. He has to lean on it. All those smichas, kar alein takef l'smicha shchita. They all have a rule that the smicha, which is done before you shecht it, has to be done immediately before the shchita. And that means not just as far as time, but they also have to be done in the same place. Since the Torah requires you, since we're going to see that you have to do shchita immediately after the smicha, so therefore they have to be done in the same place. If you would do it someplace else, then it's going to take time. Chutz mizu, the only exception is the mitzayra. Shahoisa b'shar nikner. They would do the smicha in this gate that was near the azara, where the mitzayra would stick his hand in order to get the dam put on his thumb. So that was that was done. That we did the smicha in the shar nikner, and then they would transport the animal. They would walk the animal over to the tzafin of the mizbeach, and then they would do it. Or we'll see what they did with the behema, but they
every carbon gets smicha?
No, not every carbon.
And it's usually the person who gives the carbon or the kohen does smicha?
Both of them. If you remember, we had like the kohen puts his hand underneath, and then they push it together. Hands one, I don't remember. One of them's hands on top, and one's on bottom, and they do it together. So this was done in the shar nikner. Since he's tamei, remember we were talking before about the mitzvah putting in his hand in order to get the matnas dam, getting the dam on his behind, so he has to put his hand in order to get it. But now we're talking about a different topic. We're talking about prior to the shechita. There's no dam yet into the azara. Therefore, he does the smicha outside. He has to get from the dam of his chatas and dam ashamai. They're both spritzed on him. So what's the big deal? Why can't he just be standing outside, do the azara right after you do the smicha? If you hold bia b'mixus loishma bia, what's stopping you from? Why are we saying that mitzvah is an exception to the rule? You always do the smicha together with the shechita. Why can't you figure it out? It just takes a little bit of a workaround. Rav Yosef says, Hamani Rav Yosef bar Yehuda. This is Rav Yosef bar Yehuda, which we've had a number of times throughout Shas. The Amar Merchak Tzafim. That I think I see you have a picture there, that they were three shittas. The Gemara only over here discusses two of them. That the Mizbeach is in the middle of the Azara. That means it's in the middle as far as being close. It's in between the north and the south. There's an area to the north and there's an area to the south of it, as well as there's an area to the east and the west of it. I think the Kachei Kachim, the Heichel, is a little bit set off. There's a space between it to the Kachei, not the Kachei Kachim, the Heichel to the west. Really the Ulam and then the Heichel. So there's a machlekes when we say that you have to shecht Kachei Kachim on the north of the Mizbeach. Does that mean the area directly to the north, that band going from the north, not any closer west or east toward the, is it east toward the entrance to the Azara or west toward the Kachei Kachim? It has to be directly opposite of it. Or there's another madam who says no, could even be as long as it's to the north of the Mizbech, it doesn't make a difference which part of the Azara as far as its eastern-western placement. So we're saying this is going according to Rabbi Yosef Yehuda that says it has to be all the way on the north opposite the Mizbeach. So therefore, there's no way to just stick his hand in and lean on the carbon and then shecht it, because the shechita has to be on the top of the Mizbeach. That means directly opposite the Mizbeach. So there's some distance between the entrance to the Azara and that area. Frak Gemara, V'li Avid Pish. So you said you can't stand in the ends to the Azara on the eastern side and reach that. But why don't you just make opposite, like on the northern wall of the Azara, which is and directly opposite, instead of it being the end using the gate on the eastern side of the Azara, make a little gate, make a little hole in the northern side of the wall of the Azara, right opposite the Mizbeach, and let the Mitzvah stand there and stick his hand in there to do smicha. Hakol, the pasuk says in Divrei Hayam, Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem, everything was written with plans from the hand of Hashem. Alai hiskel kol malachas hatavas, and he told me all of the works of the shapes of the work. That means Rabbi Shalom dictated exactly how the Beis Hamikdash could be, and it did not include a little door for a mitzvah. So it wasn't possible to build that. Ikad Amri, others say another explanation, right? We said Rabbi Yosef said Haman Rabbi Yosef Yehudi to answer the question that why don't you say Biba Mixus should Biba Mixus Loishma Bia? We said why can't you lean on the Mitzayra? Anyone who is Saimach has to put in his entire head and most of his body. So it's not a Bia Mixus, it's a real Bia. My time a Kol Koyach Bia. When you do smicha, you need all of your koyach. Therefore, it's not possible to suggest if you hold bia mixed shloi bia, just taking your hand, that's not going to be a valid smicha. Zok Gemara, my kasava. What do we hold in this brisa that we just said? That we said that take if Zok Gemara, my kasava. What's Rashi? My kasava. Haitana da amakol smicha tzrichas take if l'smicha shchita chatzmizu. We said that every carbon needs a smicha that's next to the shechita. They have to be done one right after the other in the same place, except for mitzayra. Ikasavar smichas asher mitzayra deraisa. If you say that the smicha of asher mitzayra is, we learn out asham, but it says by chatas that it needs smicha. So we learn that asham is similar. There's a hekesh between asham and a chatas. But asham mitzayra is slightly different than most ashamis. A chatas is brought for doing a chait. And asham is brought for doing a chait, but the asham of Mitzvah is not really brought for a chait, it's brought at the end of his tzaras to be mata him from his tzaras. So it's a unique type of asham. So it's controversial, it's a machlekes whether the smicha of a asham is deraisa. Does it have the same thing as other ashams? So if you hold that the smicha of asham is Mitzvah is deraisa, the take of smicha shchita deraisa, and it's also questionable whether this din of smicha l'shchita is deraisa. But if you say that both these things are deraisa, what kind of thing is this to say that you have to, in order to have the smicha, that you can't do the smicha samach l'shchita. If it's a deraisa, that the shchita has to be immediately after the smicha, and that you need a smicha for an asher mitzayra. So what do we care that there's an isser? It should be like the asher mitzayra that we say, that just like the dam of the mitzayra, we say the person can put his hand in, even though that's generally not allowed. We'll also let him do the smicha in the azara, even though it's generally not allowed, because that's what the Torah told you to do.
This come off the last answer of this that we say if we're leaning on it completely, and therefore you do it.
No, even without that.
We're asking.
Whatever the teretz of the last thing is, we said that this is an exception. Mitzayra, you don't do them smicha next to whatever the explanation is. It could be anyone.
The right, so you should be able to scroll all the way in.
You just go into just right. Whatever the teretz was, whichever teretz you want to apply, it's going to be the same kash. The bottom line is the Brisa said you can't go in, so why not? He says no. It's a takanas chacham. This that we said, except for a mitzayra, because even though the Torah really would allow it, but the chacham would geyser that if you're allowed to go in and do the smicha and then do the shchita, we're worried that the bailim, the mitzayra, after he does the smicha, he'll wander around. He won't go directly outside. He'll get distracted, and he'll make an extra step, and then he'll be over on a lav. He says that this din, that the smicha and the shchita have to be directly one after the other, is not a deraisa, it's takanas chacham. This Gemara is very strange. Like, what kind of, Rashi doesn't bring any explanations of where this comes from, that take of smicha shchita is deraisa. And how could it now all of a sudden we're switching it to Rabbanan? Rashi said before, take of smicha shchita is kedechsev v'samach b'shachat. But I guess we would be saying it's a sasmachta and it's really the Rabbanan. But why would the Rabbanan make such a thing of take of smicha shchita if they hold it's only the Rabbanan, if it's not a deraisa, like it's, and then Gemara is going to say something else, which is a similar problem. Meisvei, the Gemara asks, "V'sam of shachad maschita b'tayrin and afshchita b'tayrin." We said this. We saw before that we learn out that since smicha has to be with someone who's tar, because the smicha has to be done in the azar, and therefore he has to be tar in order to the smicha. So the shchita also has to be b'tar. V'yamet lav deraisa. If you say that take up l'smicha l'shchita is not a deraisa, how do we know that smicha has to be with someone who's tar? He could do the smicha outside and then bring it into the azar and do the shchita there. Smicha's asher mitzayra lav deraisa, but take up l'smicha shchita deraisa. We'll say enechanami, this din of take that you have to do them adjoining, that's deraisa. But the din that asher mitzayra needs a smicha is derabban. And whoever heard of such a thing, the chum geyser, you should do a smicha. Like it's a part of the procedure of a carbon. Like what kind of derabbanan? Derabbanans are usually worrying we don't want you to be over on something. So I say maybe it's something like that. They're worried that if you don't do a smicha on this, you'll forget to do it by another asham, a regular asham. Nah, that's the only thing I could think of.
So more answering lahapach that smichas asham tzara lav deraisa.
Right, because otherwise we wouldn't understand the thing of it doesn't make any sense because the smicha could even be not with Tyron if you could be separate.
So we're saying the whole smicha thing is not deraisa, but the fact that smicha needs to go right before shchita, that's deraisa.
That is deraisa because it says v'samach v'shachar. Right, but those are the two options. Yeah, but this really bothers me that you say it's a kachanas chacham to do smicha, but like Rashi says, it's only for this specific Asha Mitzara, which is an unusual Asha. So Ravina goes back all the way to the beginning. Ravina Amala Inyan Malkus Itmer. He says that what we said before, B'Shem Reish Lakish, all the way at the beginning of the day, we said at 6:30, that Amar Ula Amar Shlakish Tamish and Yadu Lefnim Loika Shenem B'Chadash. So you get Makas Biel and Agia. That we say Bia B'Mixes Shema Bia, and Rish Lakish had said that someone who's Machnas Yadai, a Tamei who's Machnas Yadai, is going to be Chayiv Malchus. So Ravina says, we said B'Shem Rish Lakish, that's telling you that not that you get Karas, he's saying that you get Malchus. And therefore, the whole problem that we had in the beginning, we said from a Mitzaira, that we asked that a Mitzaira that was also Balkari, and his 8th day was on Erev Pesach. We said that we asked that how we had said that the din of Pesach, which is a Karas, should be Deicha, the din of a Balkari, which is only the Rabbanon of going into the Machnal Bia. We asked, but if Bia Mitzvah Shema Bia, when he sticks his hand in, that's also Sheyesh Bakaris. Ravina says, no, sticking the hand in, Bia B'Mixus, even if it's Aser, is not going to be Chayiv Karis, it's only going to be a Chayiv Malchus. So that's a different answer for that original question that we had on Lamed Beis, Amid Beis. Right? We had asked that when the person who's a Mitzvah also Balkari sticks his hand in, we said it shouldn't just be a Derabanan of going into the Machnal Bia. Bia Mitzvah Shema Bia, that should also be a Karis. So how could the Bryce have said that the Asi Esa the Sheyesh Bakaris of Pesach and the Zeicha the Loisase of going on to Harabayis, but the Bia B'Mixus is also Chiyav Karis? He says no, the Bia B'Mixus is not the same thing as fully going into your body with your whole body, which is a Chiyav Karis. It only, even though it's Aser, it's only a Chiyav Malchus. So that's the teretz, that original kasha. Kiasa Rav and Amar Bavo, he says an entirely different teretz. He says this member of Rish Lakish was not talking about Bia B'Mixus. It was talking about something else. It's Le'inyan Tamish Anaga B'Kodesh. It's talking about a Tamei who touched Kodesh. That he's saying that it gets Malchus, the Itma, right? This is a whole different din. We're not talking about a Tamei sticking his hand into the Azara. We're talking about Rish Lakish talking about a Tamei that touches Kodesh. The Itma, Tamish Anaga B'Kodesh, Rish Lakish Amalaika. He says you get Malchus. There's no Malchus. Rish Lakish Amalaika. The pasuk says, "B'chol kodesh lo siga." It says legabe a yeledes that she can't touch kodesh. He says that's referring to kachim, and if you touch it, so it's saying that she's not allowed to touch it. There's going to be a malchus. He says that pasuk is not telling you a malchus of someone who touches kachim. It's not talking about touching kachim. It's talking about touching truma. In our minds, we think truma is also kachim, but kachim means something very specific. It means a carbon. But he says it's only referring to truma. As Rashi explains, he has a very good explanation that according to Rabbi Yochanan, we're talking about a yeledes, and it says about a yeledes that at the end of her, when she finishes, it says that she can't touch it while she's in her Yemei Tar, but at the end of her 40 days, then she can. But if it was talking about kachim, she would still need to bring her kapara. She wouldn't. A mechusar kippurim is not allowed to touch kachim, but a truma, a person is allowed to touch even when they're mechusar kapara, even before she brings her carbon as a yeledis. So therefore, he says it's talking about Isser Truma as opposed to Isser Kachim. So there's no, according to Rabbi Yechon, there's no Isser to touch Kachim. There's no Malchus. There is an Isser, but there's no Malchus for touching Kachim when you're Tameh. And according to Rish Lakish, there is. Rish Lakish, in fact, the Gemara about Rish Lakish, Hai Krala Hachidudas, is that really what he's using the pasuk for? Haimi Bayale Azar La'Ichel Basa Kodesh. We need it for someone eating Kodesh, the Itmer. Azar La'Ichel Basa Kodesh B'Nayin. He learned it out from this pasuk. Now, even though it's saying to touch, we're going to see at the end of the Yamad that that's really talking about achila. Rabbi Yochanan Tani Bardla, Rabbi Yochanan says no, that pasuk is talking about something else. Asyu tumasai may be as mikdash. We learn out the din of oichel basar kodesh when he's tamei from a gzeir shava of tumasai. It says legabe. When We see the Xeris, what the Einish is. The Einish is to get Karis. And it says, Kol Hanegea b'meis b'nefesh Adam asher yamas lo yischata es mishkan Hashem. Timi b'nefesh nefesh ahi Yisrael kini ni lo yitzarkol. So it said Oy Tumasa Boy, and it says over there a pasuk. The Rashi brings the pasuk. I don't remember what but there's a lav over there as well. So since it says Lagabi, Lagabi being Negeya, and it says Lagabi Teichel, it says Lagabi, when he comes into the Beis HaMikdash, the Tumah, that there's a Azhara as well as an Einish of Karis. So we make a Gzeir Shav of Tumasai to tell you that the same thing will apply to someone who eats Kodesh. So Tumasai may be Bias Mikdash. Malol and Anash of a Hizir, just like by Bias Mikdash. We had this all back in Shavuos and in Makkos, we learned a lot about this. That going into the Beis HaMikdash when you're Tameh, there's both an Einish of a Karis and Azhara. So you say from the Gzeir Shav, that will also tell you the Azhara for Eichel Tameh. Avkan Einish v'Hizir. Zak the Gemara. The Envet the Gemara. So the Chayra, this is so you see Rabbi Reish Lakish is using this pasuk Abachol Kodesh Loisiga to tell you an Eichel Kodesh B'Tomeh, not an Negeya B'Tomeh. So how could it be? So Gemara Tomei Shenaga B'Kodesh M'Dafka Rachmana B'Loshen Negeya. He says since we use the Loshen Negeya, it says B'Chol Kiddush Loi. What is it? What was the pasuk? Kol Hanegea. Whenever Shatei Rabasa Mizevach Hashem Hashem V'Tumasaya. Olav. I'm sorry, no. Kol Hanegea b'meitz b'nefesh. From the fact that it says it b'loshen negia, b'chol kodesh leisig, I'm sorry, when it really means to mean achila, that tells you both of them. B'da'afka rachmana b'loshen negia, azhar la'oichel, with the iskish kodesh l'mikdash. And the azhar la'oichel comes from the fact of a makish kodesh l'mikdash, that we say the eating kodesh together with bias mikdash. That tells you also an azhara to eichel. So that's how we're able to learn both things according to Reish Lakish. Okay, we'll stop over here and we'll continue with the Tanya Kavasai tomorrow. B'ez Hashem.